Hello, today I will be summarizing my findings in Reading Pop Culture Chapter 1 by Jeff Osborne and Chapter 2 of the Rhetorical Analysis. So, in Chapter 1 of Reading Pop Culture, Osborne goes on to mention that it would conclude that consumerism is a huge role here in American society. Osborne goes on to say that capitalism is one of the main factors due to the ever-growing competition of trying to release products and money basically wise. Osborne goes on to mention 6 different types of articles that support this idea by 6 different authors such as Barber, Lutz, Bartz, Ho, Postural, and Bryson. So going on with Barber, he too believes that consumerism is a major part. There's always the idea that shopping must be exhibited constantly in society, in which it's basically a higher way of making money. That's all the companies care about, making money. Not only that, with such an influx of stores that are presented in the media, that are presented even wherever you go when you're walking, it's recognized at a younger age, and such of it prevails in today's society where it's constantly growing in the minds of children, where if they work to play, and playing in this case means shopping, there's always the idea that, oh, if I work, if I gain the money, I could get what I need to buy. What they believe that they need to buy is not what they really need. It's those constant ideas that are referred into their mind that, like, oh, this is what's needed, when what's needed is barely even advertised. Then Lutz goes on to say that every word in an ad has a purpose of being there. No company ever puts in a random word to try to capture the audience's attention. They have these things called weasel words, which are they're empty words. They're used there for a purpose. So it's not just they're not supposed to be there without trying to get the audience's attention. Some of these weasel words are things such as help and virtually. They're illusions. One of the main examples is oh, this will help increase your well-being. But is there really proof to that? They use it in order to convince the person to buy it, and the person will believe it will help constantly over time, but it's the constant use and buying that it needs to be done. So one of the things that let's suggest in this article is that one has to develop critical reading for it. You can't look at an ad and believe everything that they're saying. You have to really analyze why this word was put in, why this phrase was put in. There's no such thing as there's no such thing as an honest ad at times. Now Bartz goes on to say that there's always hidden images in different types of consumerism. He goes on to show off the French toys. He believes, and it's showed, that French toys have a meaning to mimic. So when a kid chooses to buy a toy or an object to entertain themselves with, there's a real reason as to why. So say a kid decides to buy a toy kitchen, as a French toy. It's basically mimicking everything else the adult will be doing, and it's trying to prepare them to the idea that they can't use their own imagination to use as toys. They want to engrave the idea that this is what they need to do in the future. You can't have any other option. But in a way, this kind of relates to American consumerism, especially with toys, because it's aimed to sell. French toys are aimed to sell for the greater purpose of trying to mimic what they're going to do in the future. American toys sell because it's entertainment, and they're still engraving ideas of what should be done and what shouldn't be done. And that's what Barth is trying to explain, that consumerism, even in other places, is still mimicking in a way to American consumerism, that there's always trying to be an idea and lodged into it. Now Ho goes on to say brings in their own personal experiences, especially with assimilation and culture. Ho, being Vietnamese, had different ways of living, and that's one of the things that affected them greatly. They would go on to say that they wouldn't want to follow their own traditions, such as one of the things being food. Such they would go on to say like, oh, I would be the person to always have this type of lunch while this person had this type of lunch, and I would be the one that made fun of. So at a young age, Ho was trained to try to get out of their own culture and try to diverge into the American culture. But as time went on, Ho would realize that the American culture overuses of others to make money. One example that she mentioned was that she would see um, a store or a restaurant that would say authentic Vietnamese food, but it was either overly priced, and people who actually made the food weren't even Vietnamese. The only person of color that would actually be working there would be the waiter, or sometimes even the dishwasher. So Ho was realizing that the American culture uses it at their own gain, again with money. They don't really try to, they may want to live out the culture or share it with others, but in reality, it's still a way of gaining money. Now, postural goes on to say that chain stores are everywhere. Wherever you go, a town loses its meaning of what it was before because there's always one of the things referred to was a Chipotle. They said, "Oh, when I come from this area, there's always going to be another one of this area, so I'm always going to recognize it." It becomes a way of living somehow. A person gets so accustomed to their own surroundings, such as, in this case, chain stores, they're used to it. So when they go to other places, they're not losing where they came from in a way. They'll still have certain memories tied to these chain stores because they're always a constant part of their life. So it's becoming such a huge thing to look over that it makes it easier on people somehow, which is really, you wouldn't really think of it that way. But when I read this chapter, it kind of clicked that I, in my own experience when traveling, like when I went from LA to Washington D.C. for a while, I was expecting like different things, like different, but there was always like some certain changes, like, oh, I recognize that because that's the same style of architecture, the same style of design. Like you're never leaving a piece behind due to these chain stores because you're always going to be a constant figure, and they know it's going to be a safe keep whenever you go away from your hometown. Now, Bryson goes on to detailing a lot of the things from commercial aspects of branding and advertising. One of the stories that they first mention is the detective camera, which is now known as the Kodak brand. How even it could start off as one idea or one perception, and as time goes on, the wording, the style, the way of trying to get people's attention changes, such as from detective camera to Kodak camera. And money helps. Money helps when trying to get the right advertiser, when trying to get the right slogans, and then as different mediums began to appear. So it first went from print to digital. So did advertising. Advertising began began to expand their ways to target bigger audiences, to target different areas. And as more companies diverge, such as Gillette and other targets, more tactics began to evolve, such as touching into the anxiety of oneself and trying to say, like, if you don't get this product, will this really be happening to you? Like, they start tricking the mind, believing that, like, oh, you must do this to even think of succeeding in a certain area, a form of verbal hypnosis, as Bryson said. And so they're really what Bryce is trying to say is that commercial aspects and branding are tricking the minds, like saying, "Oh, you have to buy this to even succeed." And this all connects to the rhetorical analysis of chapter 2. Rhetorical analysis in chapter 2 talks about criticism is a huge role into anything. It has to be done at an analytical level. There are always going to be many dimensions on how to analyze the things that we are being presented with. We need to identify the effort, look at different parts to fully be able to criticize something that we're given. Because criticizing is not just saying, like, oh, this is wrong. Criticizing is looking into their topic, looking into what they're saying, and trying to think, is this really true? Is this really, can this be fully supported? So, in a way, what we could bring in from chapter 2 of the rhetorical analysis is that we need to criticize everything that we're being presented to, all the chain stores, all the assimilation, all the ways that American culture is trying to overuse culture to their own gains. We need to find a way to look at these different parts and really see if what they're trying to promote is true or not, if what they're trying to promote has a meaning to what we need. Is it really needed? Do we need to really buy this to be, do we really need to support more of the American consumerism and the way it's heading? No one no one is safe to advertising because advertising finds a way to really trick you. But if we allow ourselves to criticize with a meaning on actually analyzing it to a deeper extent than we would have thought to originally, we could find a way to be part of the American consumerism where we truly need to buy only what we need and not what we think we need.